Welcome to Season 4 of the NAC 4 Business Podcast.
Today's show is brought to you by our K4B Profit Snapshot. Here's one question worth sitting with. If you stepped away from your business for 30 days, would it grow or contract? That answer tells you a lot about where you really stand. Try the free 5-minute snapshot. It measures process, profit, and personal freedom. Link is in the show notes.
Question to the listener. Why does our healthcare cost more every year, yet help our people less? Our guest breaks down how business owners and advisors can stop overpaying for broken health plans and make smarter wellness choices that actually work. He'll explain the real options in today's healthcare marketplace, how wellness programs can reduce costs while improving employee outcomes, and how companies, even with those as few as 10 employees, can use strategic, tax-efficient wellness solutions as a true business advantage. Our guest today is Nate Hallums. He's a longtime entrepreneur and wellness strategist who brings more than over 30 years of experience helping business owners, executives, and nonprofits and faith-based organizations reach their goals after starting his career with a Fortune 50 company. As the force behind BYF Consulting and Backyard Fishing Agency, Nate leads an EHP wellness partnership that delivers world-class employee wellness programs while uncovering real healthcare savings for organizations as few as 10 employees and well beyond 250. His team actively supports more than 90,000 employees across state governments, professional sports franchises, and publicly traded companies. Known for his clear, practical speaking style, Nate educates leaders and their advisors on how the healthcare marketplace really works, what options exist, and how to make smarter choices that benefit both people and the bottom line. He's also helped consultants and financial professionals fund their own fees through the savings of his program, and he continues to run a results-driven marketing agency that serving both small businesses and enterprise-level clients. There's sharp focus on ROI. Nate, absolute pleasure having you here today. Thank you so much for joining us. Do you have a favorite quote or saying?
Well, one of my mentors, it's always stuck with me. It's so good. You can't direct anything that's not in motion. Or you can't direct or redirect anything that's not in motion. So I have to have, even if I'm 180 degrees out of sync with where I want to go, or where I figured out I want to go. If I'm not in motion, I can't do anything. If I'm inert, I can't change direction.
Hence being a rock as opposed to a landslide, right?
There you go.
Fair enough.
I like it. Yeah.
You started in a Fortune 50 company. So usually that's that's a nice safety zone. I've been in the corporate side, maybe not the corporate top 50. What made you move from that space to entrepreneurship? Because, there's kind of safety knowing there's a paycheck at the end of the day.
Right. Well, funny, one of I worked for IBM for a number of years and one of the guys that I went through training with, I asked him years later after we both left IBM. I said, so when did you know I was going to go start my own thing? He said, when I met you. So something about me that I guess speaks to that. But it was a great education. It was an opportunity to get into the boardroom and the C-suite pretty quickly and at a young age. And so that was a tremendous education. But I wanted to take those ideas, concepts that I learned and apply them to smaller businesses and my own initially. And then ultimately, as I learned more and more things about the challenges of small businesses, I wanted to start to help other businesses take advantage of the things that I'd learned. And so there's a great advantage to having that corporate experience that you can bring to the smaller business because large corporations have to be more organized, have to make decisions that impact the entire enterprise. And smaller businesses, a lot of times, are a little bit more transactional. So to help you get into the world of strategy and out of the world of tactics, that was kind of the draw for me.
It's interesting. I totally get what you're saying. Having been inside the corporate box and outside the corporate box, there's certain things you take with you. But you picked healthcare. I mean, that's first off, that means you recognize there was a problem. So what was the trigger for you from the healthcare perspective, and why healthcare?
Yeah, well, it's been a journey to get to healthcare, and in kind of the same sort of, I'll call it maturation process for myself, is having gone through all of the different things that you try to solve problems for businesses and for business owners, but ultimately you're solving problems for people. And one of the biggest problems for people that impacts their ability to do the things that you're recommending be done depends on their ability to show up completely. And a lot of that is healthcare. So one of the early experiences that I had was I played football for a number of years and car accidents, just, life along the way, I had neck issues. And so those had to get addressed. and I was able to get those addressed relatively. It took this emergency. I'll put it that way. It took this emergency. I can't turn my head sort of emergency to make me go find a solution. And that's where a lot of employees are. A lot of people are just in general. Until it gets to an extreme, we really just kind of let's keep on going. I've still got to go to the soccer game. I've still got to show up to the PTA meeting. I've still got to go to work, all those things. And so it's easier. I always choose the easiest path as just a human. And my easiest path is just to ignore things until they're an emergent situation. So, and that's kind of applies to the whole system.
I think you just described almost every dude I know. I ain't going to see no doctor. Now I got to, my arm's falling off. Now I got to go see it. Typical.
Right.
I'm being bold here. Speaking of people making decisions and wellness, right? Like waiting until the last minute. What still surprises you though, from an organizational point of view, whether it's, an SMB or, you're an enterprise level? What surprises you about their decision tree on wellness?
Well, it's a lot. It's kind of like back to the individual. We only do it when we have to, and similarly with business owners, we only do it when we have to. And our focus is making our widget, selling our smoothie, whatever our services are, our products are. We're focused on that and getting those things out the door and in somebody else's hand in exchange for cash. So unless it applies to that clearly, then I'm not really going to be focused on anything else in my business unless I have to. And so with the mandatory requirements at certain levels of employees, now I have to. So the real creative, one of the reasons I really enjoy working with small businesses is they really have more of a sense of employee well-being in general, because one, they have more interaction with people and maybe even their families, so that they really kind of see the whole picture and take a little bit more holistic approach to being an employer. And so smaller businesses are actually looking for solutions. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot that are really affordable. And so you kind of have this kind of catch-22. As I get into a larger enterprise, I really care less, and I'm really more focused on my career and the things that I'm doing for the business. And as a whole, the business is in that mode. So we have to make larger businesses do it, and the smaller businesses are more open to it, but have fewer choices.
So when you say wellness, usually I think medical, right? And then dental's not far behind. And then I realize, oh gosh, I got to go visit the dentist. And then then I got my eyes, and I got my ears, and God knows what else can kind of go sideways on your body. Is it just physical health, or is wellness a little broader spectrum?
It is a broader spectrum, and more studies are coming out on how someone's wellness. And if you take, again, there's a holistic approach. And as you're saying, we tend to think of it on the physical body side and disease and all of that. So that's really covered, or should be covered, by what we call your major medical plan. So if you've got Aetna, Blue Cross, Cigna, those big companies offering major medical stuff for the person who has to wait for the emergency to go in and see, they're covered. And so that, where there's a whole series of questions that go around that and how we get those things installed. Wellness sits on top of that and actually should be preventative. So if healthcare is emergent and dealing with existing, maybe chronic problems, wellness should be really more of a holistic and preventative. And a lot of that starts with your mind. And because your mindset is going to impact everything else, whether it's stress levels, it's just in general, I'll call it mental health. So we had mental health challenges, both from the severe to less severe, or what would be considered minor, but still more impacting than we might ever know. And then COVID hit, and so that's exacerbated all of those issues and really put a spotlight on mental health. So that's one of the big components of wellness is mental health, which impacts, I think everyone would agree, that impacts your entire life. If I'm depressed, or my kid's depressed, I'm under stress because I'm having marital issues or financial issues, all those things manifest themselves into physical issues. But if I can address it on a preventative basis, have an outlet for the mental health side, I am in much better shape, and so is my whole organization.
So when you're talking about preventative, mental health is really important. That's a forefront item, because of anything to do with the head. If where the head goes, the body tends to follow. Even if you're wrestling, apparently that's kind of the guide.
Sure.
Do you also deal with because the other things that influence good health is sleep, diet, exercise. Is that
Mhm.
also part and parcel? Like, do you offer if someone is going, I'm not doing it well, you know, pick a
Mhm.
lane, right? I'm not
Right.
doing my sleep
Sure.
well, whatever.
Mhm.
Is that also part of the overall package? That's part and parcel.
Yes, yes. In fact, and you may have you've obviously I think if you watch television at all, you've seen the Ozempic commercials.
Yep.
So weight loss, weight management, all of those things. We're the fattest country in the world. All those things that we get messaging on. How do you address it? And they've come up with this kind of miracle set of drugs. There's multiple vendors now that are providing those things. It addresses a major issue, and that is weight and weight control, and all of the different things that manifest themselves out of control weight management. So it impacts mental health. It impacts so many different things. And again, on a preventative basis, if I can lose weight, maybe I don't have the heart attack. If I can lose weight, maybe my arteries don't lock up. So there's all kinds of down road benefits in addressing that single issue. And so knowing that that was a very important item in people's lives and that it was very expensive to do, or I had to have a private coach, I had all these different things. I'd talk about putting it off. I'll just go ahead and have my 3 meals and I'll exercise whenever I do. So in some cases, exercise really isn't the solution because they've got other metabolic issues. So we offer those same types of drugs at about an 80 to 90% discount to the market if you're as part of our package, and that goes for the whole family. So that has been a very popular area. On the financial side, because that's not covered by or maybe it's partially covered by the bigger companies that are offering the major medical plans. The fact that it's most of those offerings are through employers that are paying out of pocket. So without getting into a lot of the detail, there's a self-insured and there's a fully insured version of healthcare. To get those sort of benefits are generally self-insured benefits that are coming from the company, meaning that the company's writing at least part of the check, if not all of the check, for your GLP-1 is what is that category of drugs. So to be able to eliminate that or just really, really minimize it down to almost nothing makes it the barrier to entry goes away. We provide the access is there, and we take it a step further. We don't just say, here's your pills or here's your shot, and you're on your own. We actually assign a coach to you. And that coach can be as involved as you like. That coach can just be a guide, or they can be a very active coach working on nutrition and exercise and all kinds of other plans for you in combination. So there's a long-term success with the GLP-1 plans. If you look at the bariatric surgeries that people have, a lot of times that's not a long-term solution because I didn't change my other habits. And so this is a total holistic wellness approach that happens to use a drug to
So,
aid you to go.
so for every dollar they spend in this, whether it's either paid by the employer or co-paid by
Mm-hmm.
employer employee. So if I spend a dollar in this effort, what is the return on investment that you've found for companies? And first off, there's money, but there's also time, right? And
Mm-hmm.
staff turnover. Like, what are the ripples that are positive outcomes that I've spent a dollar here, but it's like, if I
Yeah,
do training for the Olympics, if I practice
sure.
enough, or I go to a marathon, right? If I practice enough, it's not, I won't die that day when I go to do the marathon. What are you finding as an ROI out of this spectrum?
Yeah, great question. And back to your question of why aren't people doing it? Why don't people address this area until they have to? Is because it's not perceived as an ROI area. And so if you start with the precept that your real assets are not your shop floor, they're not your inventory of devices or things that you're selling. Your real assets are your people. They happen to move those things through your business, but if you address your real asset in a way that's the most productive, least cost, but gets you to this whole person showing up because you're paying the whole salary, then that alone is just conceptually is a higher ROI. But there have been studies done. Johnson and Johnson did a study. It's a little dated now, but I think it was through 2011. They said over the prior 10 years, they had generated or received resulted in $250 million worth of higher productivity, greater throughput, all the different things you might measure on a normal basis with your business, but not necessarily think about it in terms of the wellness of your employees. GE did a study and they said dollar for dollar, there was a almost 4-to-1 return on investment for every dollar that I spent. So hard costs, hard benefits, and these are for plans that actually cost out of pocket. And I know we'll talk about how we can make that not an out of pocket cost, but for people that are writing checks, spending money, big companies have to force themselves to go through those sort of measurements to see what it is they're spending. If it's a big budget item, where they're getting a rate of return on it. And because their biggest cost is people, if I can make those people more productive in whatever way I'm doing that, not just using AI in my business, how about providing a better solution for the individual that's working on the shop floor behind that cubicle.
So if I'm in business and I'm starting up and I got a crew of people in here, and like you said, if I have this coverage, if something goes sideways for them in their particular instance, not through any fault of their own, I can help address it and they'll stay with me. How do I shop for that? How do I shop for the right size, the right product? Because at the end of the day, if I live in the downtown somewhere, a smart car, tiny little thing might be an ideal thing, but it's not a back 40, a 4x4, going through the bush. So how do I find the right vehicle for what's happening around me? How does someone scope that out and make a choice?
Yeah, great question. And it's, it can be a, multi-layered, complex question. Hopefully you have a good advisor who can help you navigate those things. And, as we talked about earlier, actually taking advantage of the plans that you invest in are always critical. So I would look at talking to my employees to find out what their major challenges are. Are there mental health care issues that we need to address for you and your family? Are there weight issues for you to address for you and your family? What can your family afford as a deductible? So what's ended up happening in terms of structure, and this year has been one of the biggest increases that people have seen on their premiums. And what a lot of companies I had a $3,000 deductible that I had to meet last year, and so for us to keep the same plan at just a 15% increase in cost, both to you and to me as the employer, we're going to make that a $5,000 deductible this year. I talked to a company the other day; they have a $10,000 deductible. You think I'm going to go use my plan if I have a $10,000 deductible, but the employer has met the legal obligation of providing care, making it available and accessible. So interviewing your employees and finding out what their needs are will help you tailor some of the plans, and some of them can be very modest. If I can just get to 90% of what is available through a Aetna or a Kaiser or those sort of companies, then I've serviced maybe 90% of the needs of my employees, and then maybe we try to figure out something else where you're able to, as an employee, save money in a tax deductible manner, so that you can meet the other 10%. So, and that can also help on the deductible side. So it's really just understanding your market, and your market is your employee base. And so going into that and getting as much of a defined solution before you even talk to anybody, a product provider, I think you're much further down the road than most people are when they just say, okay, my cousin is a health insurance guy. I'll just talk to him and we'll see. And so you end up in a situation where if all I have is a hammer, you must be a nail kind of sales, right? So.
Yeah. Ow. Are there, yeah. Ow. Yeah. I totally get that. Are there certain verticals that, this is an easy fit, and there are other verticals that the premium is going to be higher? Kind of what I'm thinking of is, if you're a white collar worker, you're working in an accounting firm, or you're, developing code for SaaS platforms, stuff like that, versus I'm a lumberjack and I'm okay and I cut down logs for a living, right? Two different areas. If you're a lumberjack, you might not need to have the workout per se. You might have to work on a few other things, right? Your body joints, et cetera, and your musculature. Are there particular verticals that, not buyer beware, but you might meet a more expensive need because of the nature of what you do?
Yes, and a lot of times that shows up. So all of this is risk management, right? So it's all insurance in any form is a form of risk management. So I'm trying to offload the cost of that $100,000 heart attack or operation to an insurance company when one of my 150 employees has to have that. And so we invest with companies that will take on that risk. So how do we shift the risk, or how do we manage it within our own organization? And a lot of times the differential is more in workers' comp than it is in the healthcare. The way the difference in industries impacts healthcare a lot of times is your what they call your experience rating. So when you have to, and again, going back to we don't do things until we have to. So you're more likely to have to tap the health network as a lumberjack or as a construction worker or a roofer than you are if you're sitting at a desk. So when you have to do that, that experience rating goes up. That increases the premium on a per worker basis. And so I think about that, and then as an additional fail-safe or kind of actuarial support, workers' comp comes in and says, we'll also pay the employee, we'll also pay some of the healthcare cost. And so those are two kind of hand in glove operations that you need to try to figure out how to optimize and reduce your risk and out of pocket as an employer, of course, for the employee. And how do you keep your costs down on the other side on the people that you're paying for that coverage? So to answer your question, it's our program, and I guess any healthcare program, is really industry agnostic. You just have different experiences based on the risk of the work that's being done.
Fair enough. So something looks good on paper. Does that mean it's going to work well? And is it you've stepped into the breach and you've found the floor's not here, and you like in one of those cartoons on Saturday from years ago, all of a sudden you just dropped.
Mm-hmm.
What's the indicator of
Well, in the broadest sense, owners, executives need to educate themselves on what is available out there and kind of the pros and cons. And so not that any one solution is going to be right for everybody, but it may be right for you with the right amount of tailoring. But the broad categories of wellness, and again, wellness sits on top of a major medical plan, are participatory and voluntary. So wellness became this catchphrase and policy attempt or direction, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. And so all the leading edge companies had it. Now, if you're a company of 100 or more and you don't have a wellness plan, who are you? The issue, so my wife works for a major hospital here in the Cincinnati area, and I had some issues before I was involved with our current program. And I had to look, hunt, peck, call, search for solutions. They were there, but there was no access, particularly for the family member, to be able to find the resources that I need to address what was turning into, they call it a frozen shoulder issue. So I found some decent resources, but it was a lot of work and a lot of time on my part to get there. And had I not been in so much pain, I wouldn't have put in the effort. And so that is a voluntary plan, or what they call a health contingent plan. The best plans that I have seen are participatory plans. So if you're engaged and involved and the provider has to do a number of things to help this thing be in that category. But if you are engaged almost automatically in the plan, then and that plan delivery is more active or proactive, then that to me is a better solution, just because of the human nature that we've already experienced, just because of our whole orientation to healthcare. For me to access the plan, for me to be that more fully involved, engaged employee, and to be present, not taking time off to go do the different things that I might have to do to address my medical issues, then to me, that is a more productive solution for the person, the individual employee, as well as the employer. And there's some other financial benefits that come along with that as well.
You're mentioning about funding, like, who's paying, who's dropping the dime, so to speak, for this. You also mentioned there might be some tax breaks or some other type of breaks. How does that take shape? How does that happen?
Yeah, well, the encouragement from the government. So the government bears a lot of cost when we're underinsured, because hospitals just by their charter have to take you in. And so, and because most people will wait, and particularly if they're not insured, they don't have a solution. It's almost all emergent care. And so the powers that be have been struggling with this for a long time. But so creating an incentive for businesses. So let me give you an example. If you go back to the mid 70s, you're probably too young for this, but if you go back to the mid 70s, we were emerging from a defined benefit world and we were moving into a self-funded retirement world because an affordability issue, right? We couldn't afford anymore and we were too reliant on the investment managers to allow us to afford fully funding retirement plans for all of our employees. And so the government said, let's incentivize employers to provide an avenue for self-funding. And if we give them enough time, then the market will take care of a lot of the self-funding options. At least they'll have whatever they saved over that period of time. So they made 401ks tax advantaged. And so meaning that I can deduct whatever I put into my 401k and I don't have to pay tax on that money until I take it out. So similar concept. So fast forward 2026, if you have more than 2 employees and you don't have a 401k, who are you? So now let's look at it, in terms of healthcare and wellness. So I can deduct my healthcare premiums, but that's money out of pocket, and that money keeps going up and up and up, both for the employer and the employee. And so what can I do to help address the stress of the whole system? And so let me at least make wellness more affordable by allowing it to be deductible. So now we put that right up there with the deductibility of your major medical plan. But now it's can I afford that? Yeah, I get a deduction, but maybe I'm not in the highest tax bracket and maybe that's not benefiting me as an individual as much as I would like, even though I would like to have access to those benefits. So they went a step further. And this is 13, 14, 15 years ago that the structure and the laws and all of the rules of these plans were put in place, but people really didn't take advantage of them. Or smaller businesses with good advisors took advantage of them, I'll put it that way. So now the process is I can send all of the services that I want to provide to my employees to Health and Human Services, HHS, and they will say the value of your service is $1,000, $2,000, whatever the number is. In our case, it's $2,200, and so that's the amount you can deduct. So so even though it's not your cost, which is what we got to deduct on the medical side, that's not your cost, that's the value. So let's deduct that value off of your paycheck, and then that generates a tax saving, a real tax savings, particularly if it's off of FICA savings, right? So I remember when I first met FICA, I was like, who is this guy FICA? It's taking all my money, right? So I want to reduce my payment to FICA, and that savings then creates what I call a benefits bank, or this debit card, however you want to look at it, that allows me to spend those tax savings on wellness. So the plan has to have all of its ducks in a row. It's got to be compliant to all the different things that you have to have in place. But if you do all those things, Health and Human Services gives you that value. You're able to deduct it. I still have this affordability problem because it's out of my paycheck, and even though I did the tax savings. So they created a way for us to put it back in. If the wellness plan does its job, delivers the value that we said that it was worth, and they can demonstrate that, then we'll let you put that back into the paycheck. So there's a way for your paycheck to look exactly the same, nothing out of pocket for the employee, nothing out of pocket for the employer. They just have to say yes to the structure. And now I've created a currency to pay for my wellness. I don't change my take-home pay. And as long as I focus on a plan that has all of their ducks in a row and I can check all that out and their compliance is all set, I get the best of both worlds. So I believe that sort of tax advantage wellness is going to be like the 401k was. 20 years from now, we're going to look back and say, hey, if you don't have a tax advantage wellness plan, who are you? And the momentum has already started to particularly with this last year, having the increases that we've had on healthcare, it's just unsustainable. And so there has to be a better solution, and maybe a supplemental solution that does a number of things, not only provides a financial piece, but really addresses this holistic approach to providing health and wellness to the employees.
So a company sets up a plan. Everything is running smooth. It's cost effective. The staff are covered. Everybody's smiling. How often do you revisit? Do you review? If the company merges, if the company scales, would be the obvious triggers. But how often, if nothing drastic changes, how often you revisit? Is it population age dependent? All of a sudden, your workforce never left because this is the
Mm-hmm.
best place ever, and they're here
Mm-hmm.
now. Year 20, and they're
Mm-hmm.
still cruising. But the body goes yes,
Mm-hmm.
in year 20. 20 years
Mm-hmm.
downstream, it's we're going to shift the gears a little bit. How often do you revisit the establishment to make sure it's at a peak?
Well, personally, for my clients, I'm constantly looking at getting feedback from the person that's answering the phone, or the middle manager who nobody's really paying much attention to other than the people right around them. I want to see how our plan is impacting their lives. And there's some phenomenal stories, almost you might say even life-saving stories, particularly with this GLP-1 stuff, because our plan is available for the whole family. There's been stories about kids and particularly teenagers being able to access the mental health care, these weight loss drugs. Those are probably the two biggest areas where I get just these impactful stories. But as a part of our requirement, this is the ducks in a row on the provider side. Part of our requirement is being able to provide immediate on-demand reporting on what the activity is within your organization. And one of the things that we do is we say, if you weren't able to access this service, what would you have done? The most common answer is nothing. And so when I talk about productivity, when I talk about emergent care, all of those things go through the roof if I had done nothing. So now that I'm able to address it, so I'm able to report on that. We meet that requirement. The management knows what's happening. It's feedback. So the other favorite saying that I have is feedback makes the world go round. So feedback by having that kind of instantaneous or on-demand reporting, and then from a regulatory standpoint, having the consistent reporting to the folks that you need to report to. That's all great information and great insight for the management and for us to be able to look at what activities, what's accelerating in terms of usage, what's declining, why is it declining, can we do a better job, can we provide a better solution, because we believe the need hasn't necessarily gone away, but we want to investigate that and make sure that's the case. So reporting almost by requirement is on a monthly basis. And so looking at it as a provider, and I'm your individual advisor, then I don't know if I'm more or less active than other advisors, but I'm always interested in that feedback loop.
So we talked about companies, whether you're, a few staff or many staff. What happens because you're located in the U.S. and so you're obviously
Mhm.
doing coverage in the continental U.S.
Right.
Um, is it unique? Say if a company has a footprint, let's say in New York, and has a footprint in California, and
Mhm.
another footprint in Texas. How do you manage that? Or even better yet, they're international, and Buddy's going over to
Mhm.
pick a country, and they got staff there.
Mm.
How do you manage that type of coverage?
Yeah, well, for the international stuff, because our plan, I wouldn't say depends, but produces these FICA savings, the people that are, so FICA is a U.S. based or driven process. So those tax advantages would happen only for the U.S. employees. It's not an expensive item, but we wanted to make it as inexpensive as possible. And so zero is good. And then going for your overseas or out of country employees, they can purchase the plan and it's about $160 a month. And because of the savings that are happening for the US based employees, so there's no challenge for us to be anywhere in the US. And with this thing called the internet, we're able to actually communicate with those folks and have conversations like this to be able to make sure we're on top of things and everything's getting addressed, reporting, all that stuff is education reporting and everything is happening properly. But for the internet, because of the savings in the US, a lot of times what companies will do, I have a client that has I guess about 40% of their employees are in Canada. And so they have taken the savings that they received. We haven't even talked about the employer savings. So they'll take the savings that they've received over there and fund the benefit because they've seen so much value for it in the US. They'll fund the benefit for the non-domestic or international workers. And those savings for the employer are as much as, well, So the guaranteed minimum savings is about $640 a year. That's pure FICA. Because we impact so many other elements of the whole healthcare business, I'll call it, workers' comp goes down, your increase of your healthcare, your major medical, the big names that you think about, Aetna, Blue Cross and all that, those go down because your experience rating goes down. We talked a little bit about that. We can actually, as a wellness provider, as a participatory wellness provider, we can be your primary care provider as well. In fact, people have looked at us as a concierge style, and there are people out there that are paying $1,000 a month to have more, to have on-demand medical care because they didn't want to wait the 2 or 3 weeks it takes or 6 weeks it takes to get to their normal provider. So they're paying out of pocket for this concierge style. Well, we provide that as part of our service. In fact, we prefer it because it helps us demonstrate to the government our tax advantage because we're providing these elements of care. So we can be your primary care doctor, and a lot of times you go to your primary care doctor to get a referral to the specialist that you need. And then that specialist gives you a referral to the technician that does the diagnostics for you. And so 6 weeks later, you might have a solution, but it took all that time. And those were all 3 points of contact with your network that increases your experience rating. So if you talk to us and we refer you directly to either the specialist or the technician, you've eliminated at least one, if not 2 touches to your system that you get charged for. Not necessarily, I was going to say not necessarily out of pocket, but it is out of pocket because you have copays on each of those. So I didn't have to leave work. I didn't have to, there's an environmental impact of me leaving work and driving to wherever. Then I didn't have to wait. And that's probably of the overall advantage. If you said, what will employees say to me if they say, Nate, we have your plan in place. What's the biggest thing that's impacted you as an employee? Access to care. So we provide a bridge, an immediate, almost on-demand access to care, to primary care. And I'm not talking about, people have said, well, we have telehealth. Well, you're generally talking to a fellow or a resident or someone like that, or maybe it's a newly licensed doctor. In our case, they're 10-year plus experience, board certified. They're already making $500,000 a year or more. They are seasoned doctors, and you can have the same person every time you call in if you like. If you want, less than a 4-hour response or less than a 1-day response, then you might take whoever's up and available. But I get that primary care 3 a.m. In our household, I'm in tick country. My wife had a tick bite. We weren't quite sure, and she called up. It was going to take 3 or 4 days, maybe a week to get into her doctor. And because it was more emergent, it was only 3 or 4 days to a week versus the 2 weeks it would normally have taken. So she would have taken off work, done her copay, and by then I already have Lyme disease. So they said, take a picture. We took a picture. We showed it to them on the phone. They prescribed whatever it was that she had to take. And they even offered a location of the fulfillment of that pharmaceutical, and it was all done within 30 minutes. So that access to care has been the greatest thing, and then all the ripple effects that has.
Pretty good. So here's kind of a play on word question. If wellness plans were fishing gear, which ones are all bait and no hook?
Well, I hate to cast aspersions on any sort of decision that people are making. I just would say do your homework and make sure you are getting what is being presented. And so in our case, I was talking about the financial benefits to the employer. We can demonstrate to you, walk you through how those financial benefits are going to happen. And we do that by we take a holistic approach on the proposal. And we look at your workers' comp. We look at your major medical. We look at all the deductibles. We look at all the family elements. Are you married? How many kids do you have? What age are they? There's no, pre-existing conditions filtered or, screening or anything like that. But if we know, then we can do a much better job on the proposal, which will show you truer savings. So in those industries you asked about that maybe have higher impacts on the healthcare system, and why they might do that. So if I'm going to save in workers' comp, we'll include that in your estimate of your savings. So there are companies that are saving $2,500, $3,000 a year every single year, starting day one from the time they put their plan in place. So make sure that whatever you're being told can actually happen and is being is being delivered to their existing client base. And one of the things that is such a key indicator is the participation. So earlier we talked about participatory versus voluntary or health contingent plans. So when we look at participation, and I've gotten inquiries based on just this alone. There are people that get paid based on the participation percentage in various plans and wellness plans in particular. And so I had a manager, senior level manager at a bank. And when I said, well, our participation's in the 95% range. And he pulled me aside after the meeting. He's like, how do you do that? We actually pay our people to use our wellness plan. And we're still only at 30%. And most of the world is at 20. And so we walked through the process. And so when you look at the benefits of the plan and how well adopted it is, if you have participation rates that are high, there's something good with the plan, because people aren't going to keep coming back and keep using it at that level if they're not satisfied.
Nate, if someone's listening to this podcast and they go, you know what? I'm going to give him a call. How do they reach you? How do they get a hold of you?
Well, easiest way, I'll just give you my number here, but I'll give you all my other stuff as well. My number is 513. I'm in the Cincinnati area, so 513-273-7789, 513-273-7789. So Nate Hallums, I'm on LinkedIn. I will provide you. So solutionhealth.info is my website, but all kinds of different ways to reach me. LinkedIn is great. I'm on there all the time. And if you're a business owner and you're not on LinkedIn, I'll tell you about LinkedIn when we talk and how that might benefit you. But it's a great way to reach me.
Nate, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your information, sharing your knowledge, and sharing the value, making sure people are covered. Yes, the government will mandate something, but if you do more than the bare minimum, you have better results. And to you, the Knack for Business listeners, want to say thank you for your time. So Nate, has been with a Fortune 50 company, and he saw firsthand how confusing and wasteful healthcare systems were failing both employers and employees. And basically that drove his experience to build a wellness solution that helps serve you better. So you got a question? Reach out to Nate.
Everything you heard today is for educational purposes only. It's not professional advice. Before you act on anything, talk to a certified expert in your area. Your accountant, your lawyer, someone who knows your situation. We share perspectives. You make the decisions. Want more? Head over to blog.knack4business.com, packed with practical episodes on AI, marketing, leadership, and growth. No fluff, just the good stuff. Subscribe while you're there. Until next time, keep building.